Well, I figured I'd make this video because I couldn't find anything else on YouTube for a leaky commercial door closer. This one is an LCN 71 4014. Don't know what any of that means, but this one was leaking fluid out the top there, and the door was starting to slam closed. So I'm going to take this one apart, try and replace the seals, and let's see how that goes. Alright, the first thing I did on this was took out this drain plug and tried to get as much fluid out as I could before I take the spring out, take the ends off. We got her put in the vise, and of course they couldn't make it easy. To get the end off there, it's got to be a weird square shaped tool to get that out. So I just bought a 1-inch bolt, grinded it down so that it'd fit right in there, and we'll see how that goes. Well, that was a pain in the ass. I finally got this loose, but it was on there. I ended up having to heat up around and had this big ass wrench on there, and as I was torquing on it with the wrench, I was tapping that, a little impact action. So took a while. Don't give up, it does come loose. So this was my setup to get this side off. Once again, had to heat it up quite a bit around the edges there. I used my big wrench, and I knew that there's a big spring obviously in the middle of this, so after I loosened it, when I was turning it out, I had my big clamp on here, just relieving some of that pressure for when it got to the end of the threads. I'm glad I did. You know, it's not like it's going to shoot off of there, but I just didn't want to mess up any of the threads for when it goes back together. I also noticed that if you don't have the sticker on there, it's stamped 4014 on the side, and I think that would probably only matter if you were looking for a new complete unit. The whole reason I'm doing this is because I looked and I couldn't find online anything that matched this exactly, and anything close was like in the $300 to $400 range, so here we are. Okay, this top one was by far the hardest one to get off of there, so get ready for that. You know, if you can find a place that will rebuild these for you and you can pay less than $100, $150, I would recommend that, because to get that top one off, you know, my big wrench wouldn't fit because of those two guys and these guys here, so you can't get it flat on there. So I ended up buying a socket, and that wouldn't fit because the walls were too thick on the socket, so I ended up grinding that down, and then it still was not fitting great, so I ended up grinding it down on the lip here as well. And finally, with the socket on there and with my clamp, set that up, the wrench on there like that, I ended up clamping it, the whole deal together like this, so that when I was turning it, hitting it with the hammer, that would stay seated down as much as possible, because this is such a thin little nut, or whatever you want to call it, that it just kept coming off of there. But finally, after heating it up a couple of times, it broke loose. I also sprayed it with some PB Blaster. If you got the time, I would recommend spraying all these things night before and letting it penetrate in. But finally got this thing to where it broke loose, and now it's off of there. So for each of these different parts, it looks like there should be an O-ring, and there wasn't on that, or on this, or on this. And I'm guessing, there we go, that's why they were so hard to get off of there, because either just the O-rings disintegrated and they just over time got stuck on there, or this was leaking and somebody decided to just tighten the hell out of it to try and get it to stop leaking. But here's the last remaining rubber O-ring in this whole setup, and it's pretty dirty, and it was down inside this top piece here, down in there. So I'll replace that with a nice new one, as well as put new ones on everything else, and we'll get it put back together. All right, got it all back together. The only thing that I didn't end up doing was putting rubber O-rings in all of these. The only one that I put in there was that smaller one that went inside of this nut. They just weren't fitting right, and I don't think they're meant to have them in there. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be leaking. I filled it up with fluid, and seems to be working. I might have to top it off, and I know that this isn't the exact thing you should be using, but I put in jack oil, available at auto parts stores. So that was my project that probably took about 3 hours, hour and a half too long. So, and here it is installed on the door. One of the big reasons I wanted to go through and refurbish this one is because it's got that plate that it's mounted on, and it matches 3 other doors. There's 4 doors here. So yeah, hour and a half. I probably spent about $40 for a socket that I ground down and a bolt and some hydraulic fluid, but can't beat that.